Fix this '69 Corvette and keep it.
My guy says it's a clone with a blown motor. Get it running right, it's yours. Free.
You don't need me for that. You already have your answer. I have an expert's answer.
I want to watch the tow truck driver try to beat it. Go on. It is a free car. Unless you are afraid of it.
I had $800 to my name and my boy waiting in the truck behind me. A free Corvette would have changed our whole year.
Start it up then. And everybody hush a second.
Somebody laughed, but somebody else turned the key, and the motor caught and idled rough, stumbling and shaking under the hood, and the laugh spread across the yard. I did not touch it. I did not open the hood. I put my hands in my pockets, and I closed my eyes, and I listened. 9 seconds, that was all it took.
Well, there is your fortune. A motor that cannot hold an idle. It holds it fine, that is the whole point. Then say something worth saying, or hook it up and get it off my land. It is not broken, and it is not a clone. This car is worth more than your house. And the man who told you it was junk is standing right behind you.
Nobody laughed then. I drive a tow truck now. Nobody in that yard had one reason to listen to me, which is exactly why the man in the pressed cuffs never saw me coming. Because a long time ago, in a life I buried with my wife, I was something else. And I know the one thing a car can never lie about. Before this was over, that family would have almost everything the old man left them quietly taken away, and I would be the only person alive who could prove it. And the man who did it would not come for me. He would find the corner where my 8-year-old son waits for me every afternoon and leave him a present. To understand those 9 seconds, you have to hear what I heard. So let me show you. My name is Cassius Monroe, and I tow other people's cars for a living. I run a flatbed for a small outfit out of a town in the North Carolina foothills. Breakdowns, repos, the odd dead classic somebody's family wants gone. People wave me into a lot, point at the thing that will not move, and go back inside where it is warm. I hook it, I winch it, I haul it off. It is honest work, and nobody expects a word out of the man who drives the wrecker, which suits me fine, and it puts me on the corner by my son's school at 3 o'clock every afternoon, which is the only thing I ask of a job now. My son is Amari. He is 8. His mother, Renee, died 3 years ago, and after that I stopped being a lot of things and became one thing, which is his father. I am still learning it. Some nights supper is cereal and I let him think that is a treat. Amari knows cars by their sound. He cannot help it. He waits for me most afternoons on the corner of Delmar and 4th, and he does not watch for my truck. He listens for it, and he will name 3 cars going by before he ever looks up. Diesel. That is a stick. Hear him miss the shift. That one is Mr. Ray's, it ticks. He got it from me and I got it from a man named Sonny Doss, and I have never once told him that, because to tell him would be to open a door in my life that I nailed shut a long time ago. I keep one thing behind that door. It rides in a beat-up steel box under the seat of my truck, a mechanic's stethoscope, the old kind, a steel probe and a rubber tube and 2 cracked earpieces. Sonny Doss pressed that probe against 10,000 engines and told grown men what was wrong with their lives by what a bearing was doing. He built race motors. The fastest iron in 3 states came out of his shop, and men who did not know his name drove home faster because of him, and I stood at his bench for 9 years and learned to hear what he heard. He has been dead 11 years. That stethoscope is the last of him I have, and I do not use it anymore, and I cannot throw it out. Sonny had a line he would put to me across the block. Back when I was young and quick and sure, I already knew everything. An engine cannot fake its own heartbeat. I thought he was talking about bearings. The Ridgeway place sat 40 minutes out, up a gravel road at the top of a holler, an old tobacco farm with a barn the size of a church. Odell Ridgeway had made his money in trucking and spent it on cars, and Odell was dead now, and his son Colt had hired my outfit to help clear the barn and haul the low-value stuff off to a lot down the mountain. I want to be fair to Colt Ridgeway, because he is not the villain of this, and he is not a stupid man. He was a man in a hurry to be done with his father. Odell had spent every Sunday of Colt's childhood out in that barn with the cars instead of in the house, and now the old man was in the ground and the cars were still here, taking up the whole world. So when the family's expert walked the rows and called most of it junk, Colt did not argue. If it was junk, then his father had wasted his life on junk, and that made the grief a little easier to hold. There were 8 men in that yard the morning it happened. Colt, a couple of his buddies, a lawyer with mud on his loafers, and a silver-haired man in clean khakis and pressed cuffs who did not sweat and did not touch a thing he did not mean to. I had my gloves on and my chains out and $40 an hour riding on keeping my mouth shut. Roper walked the rows like he owned them, and maybe in his own head he did. He would stop at a car, lay one clean finger on a fender, name a number, and the lawyer would write it down. Clone, tribute, parts value only. A real shame about this one. Mice got in the wiring. Fast and smooth, and every man in that barn nodded along, because he was the one in the pressed cuffs and I was the one they had called to drag it all off. Twice I saw him linger a half-second longer than a bored man lingers, over a car that looked like nothing under its dust, and then move off quick. I filed it away without knowing what it meant. I know now. He was walking his own graveyard, counting the graves, making sure the dirt was still smooth on every one of them. You already heard how it started. Let me tell you what I heard, because it took about 4 seconds and it cost me the next 2 months of my life. An engine has a voice, and a camshaft is the shape of that voice. A mild cam idles smooth, a soft, even purr, the sound of a car that wants to take your grandmother to church. A race cam does not idle, it lopes. It opens the valve so long and so hard that at low speed the whole thing stumbles and gulps and shakes the car on its springs. A rough, angry stutter that sounds broken to anybody who does not know better and sounds like a choir to anybody who does. There was exactly one engine you could order in a 1969 Corvette that came with a cam that wild from the factory. They built a handful of them. They were meant for the track. And the man who found one now, real and running, was holding a lottery ticket worth more than most houses on that mountain. The car in that yard was loping. And here's the thing nobody in that yard understood. The thing that turned a bet into a crime. You cannot fake that. You cannot put a mild motor in a clone and make it lope. And you cannot make a real race cam idle smooth to hide it. The sound is the engine all the way down. Paint lies, paperwork lies. Fender tags come off with 2 rivets and a screwdriver. The idle does not lie because the idle is not a decoration. It is the thing itself, breathing. So when the family's silver-haired expert stood there and told a grieving man his father's Corvette was a clone with a tired motor, he was telling him something the car itself was calling him a liar about, out loud, in front of everybody, if anybody had known how to listen. His name was Barrett Roper, though I did not learn it for another hour. He had advised the Ridgway family on their cars for 22 years. He recovered fast. Now that is a hell of a party trick, he said, warm as a preacher, to the yard and not to me. Colt, this fella can appraise a car with his eyes shut. You want him to read your palm next? A couple of the buddies laughed. Roper kept smiling. I have known these cars longer than you have been alive, son. That is a clone with a swapped motor and a bad tune, and I would be careful, friend, telling grieving people their trusted man is a fool or a thief in front of a yard full of witnesses. You got anything but a good ear and a wrecker? I did not. A sound in my head and 11 years of listening, and none of it would stand up for 1 second in that yard against a man in pressed cuffs with 2 decades of trust behind him. I knew that better than anybody alive. 11 years back, I had a shop and a name. I stood up at a big auction and told a room full of serious people that the star car, a numbers-matching muscle car everybody had come to worship, was a fake, a common car wearing a stamped-over motor. I was right. It did not save me. The auction house had too much money on the night, and the man who had blessed the car had too much pride. And when men like that decide you're a problem, the trade closes over you like water over a stone. Inside a year, my shop was gone, and my name was a joke, people told. And then Renee got sick, and I put my tools in a box and started driving a wrecker, and I told myself it was for the health insurance, which was true, and not the whole truth. So I shut my mouth and I hooked the Corvette to my flatbed, because a man who needs his afternoons does not fight rich men over a car that is not his. But I could not put it down. I picked Amari up from the corner that afternoon, and he told me a Camaro had gone by twice with a vacuum leak, and it was making him crazy. And I told him that was a fine thing to be able to hear, and I meant it. From the passenger seat, he cataloged the whole ride home by sound. The mail truck, the neighbor's diesel that needs glow plugs, the school bus that pops on the overrun. I used to think it was a nervous thing, until I understood it was the opposite. He is not counting to calm himself down. He is reading the world the one way that has never once lied to him, which is a thing an 8-year-old should not have had to learn yet, and did, the year his mother's voice went out of the house. So I let him name every car on the block, and I answered like it mattered, because it does. And because in the boy beside me I could see the one I used to be, and the man who taught us both, sitting in a cold barn on a Sunday with his hand flat on a fender. And under all of it, I could not stop hearing that lope, a champion running rough in a dead man's barn, hooked to my own truck, about to be dragged down the mountain and sold for the price of a used lawnmower. That night I made him breakfast for supper and did not tell him a thing about it. When he was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and took Sonny's stethoscope out of the box under the seat and just held it, the way you hold a photograph. and I made up my mind about the thing I was going to do wrong. I drove back up to the Ridgway place before dawn, alone, ahead of the crew, on the excuse of checking my straps. The barn was cold and blue and quiet, and the Corvette sat where I had chained it, patient as a saint. And I did what a man like me is never supposed to do to a thing that is not his. I slid under the front and I found the pad, the flat-machined boss on the block where the factory stamps the number that ties an engine to a car, and I cleaned 40 years of grease off it with a rag and a little solvent from my kit, and I put a light on it. There was a number there, and under that number, in the grain of the metal where a grinder and a fresh stamp can never quite reach, was the ghost of another one, re-stamped. Somebody had taken the real number down and struck a common one over the top of it, the same way they teach you to lie about a car, and stopped one careless hair short of erasing the truth. And when I ran my light down the block to the bell housing flange, there was a small mark cold stamped into the iron in a spot no factory ever marks, a builder's mark, a little pair of crossed wrenches inside a circle that I had seen on the best motors in 3 states, because Sonny Doss put it on every engine he ever blueprinted with his own hands. Sonny built this motor, and somebody had re-stamped his work to call it junk. I photographed all of it with the scale in the frame, the pad, the ghost, the crossed wrenches, and in doing it I handed Barrett Roper the only thing he needed because I had put my hands and my light and my solvent on a sealed car in a barn that was not mine, and there is no way to say that out loud that does not sound exactly like a guilty man. Roper found me at my truck an hour after the crew arrived. He gave me his hand before his name. Barrett Roper. I asked around about you last night, Mr. Monroe. He looked at my record the way you look at a thing beneath you. You had a run once, and a fall. You cried fake at an auction and it cost you everything, and most folks figured it served you right, a gifted man who could not tell an ear from a grudge. The smile held. And this morning, somebody got under a sealed car with a light and a rag. Think hard about how that looks, friend. A man with your history, alone, in the dark, with a car he has decided is worth a fortune. By noon, I was off the job. Colt sent the lawyer to tell me. By the end of the week, the whole Ridgway collection, the Corvette with it, was locked in Barrett Roper's own shop for safekeeping. Out of my reach. My prints on that engine pad and my name on a story every man on that mountain already found easy to believe. I told Amari I had finished the job early, and he asked if that meant we could go fishing Saturday, and I said sure, buddy, and we went. I sat on the bank and watched him throw a line. He did not much care about catching anything on, and I ran arithmetic behind my eyes the whole time. That is the part nobody tells you about being a father in the middle of a thing like this. You do not get to stop. You still make the eggs. You still go fishing. You just do all of it with a countdown running where your heart used to be. Here is what Roper did not know. He had never met Sonny Doss, and Sonny wrote everything down. When Sonny built a motor that mattered, he kept a build sheet. Every part, every clearance, the numbers off the pad, and he took photographs, and when a motor was going into something serious, he lodged copies with the people whose whole purpose is to remember, so the history could never quietly go missing. There is a place down in the Flatlands called the Bowman Motorsports Archive, a metal building full of old race programs and grease-stained ledgers run by people who do this for love and not money, and Sonny's papers went there when he died. I had carried some of those boxes in myself. I drove down 2 days later. The woman at the desk found the Doss collection and pulled the folder for the year Sonny freshened that motor, and I opened it with my heart going. The build sheet was there. Sonny's blocky hand. The engine, the numbers off the pad, the crossed wrenches noted in the corner. And on the line at the bottom that said helper, in his own writing, was my name. From a spring 20 years gone, when I was young, and had all my hair, and had not yet met the woman I would bury. But the photographs were gone from the sleeve. The prints that would show the pad and the mark, not misfiled, cut out clean some time ago by a man who had turned these pages before me. I stood there holding an empty sleeve and the floor went out from under me. And then I did the one smart thing I did all week. I asked the woman if they kept a visitor log. They did. A cloth-bound book at the front desk, every name, every date, going back years, because a place like Bowman is run by people who write things down. I turned the pages backward and I found him 3 years deep. B. Roper, researcher, Doss collection, 2 days, signed in his own hand. 3 years ago, before Odell Ridgway ever got sick, before there was an estate, before there was a cult, before there was a tow man on his back under a car in the dark. Barrett Roper had walked into that building 3 years ago and cut the eyes out of a dead man's file, and then he had gone home and waited for an old man to die. I sat down in that reading room with my finger on his name, because I had it backward. I had spent a week thinking I was a record driver who tripped over a rich man's crime. I was not. Barrett Roper had known exactly what was in that barn for years, and he had built the lie in the dark long before Odell went cold, patient as a man setting a trap in the fall and coming back for it in the spring. I asked the woman if there was any other copy of those photographs anywhere on this earth. She thought about it. There had been a scanning project years back, everything put onto a server off-site, and it would take a week, maybe more, to pull the files. "Please," I said, "whatever it takes." She put the request in, and the next morning she called me to say a man had telephoned to the archive claiming to be from the Ridgway estate, asking whether anyone had requested the DOS scans and asking, real polite, whether the request could be withdrawn. She had told him the archive does not discuss its business with anybody, and then she had written the call down on a slip and put it in the file because people who do this for love write things down. He was not behind me anymore. He was standing beside me, reaching for the same shelf. I drove home the long way that night, past the corner of Delmar and 4th, and I sat at the curb a while and looked at the fence post where my boy stands every afternoon listening for my truck. And I thought about a man in pressed cuffs who had cut the eyes out of a dead builder's file 3 years ago and then telephoned an archive to ask, real polite, whether a record driver had come looking. Careful was not the word for what I was up against. He had been living in my future before I ever turned up in his. The one thing he never counted on was that a place run by people who do this for love scans its paper and keeps it somewhere a phone call cannot reach. And somewhere in there, I stopped being afraid of Barrett Roper and started being angry at him, which is a great deal more useful to a man with a countdown running. Because there was a countdown. Colt wanted that barn empty. The low-value cars, the ones Roper had blessed as junk, were going to a wholesale lot in 3 weeks. And once a car like that leaves a family and goes into the trade, it scatters and the truth scatters with it. I needed the second link, and it lived inside Roper's own shop. You do not restamp a motor and swap a tag in an afternoon. It takes a bench and hours and privacy, and it leaves a window, a stretch of days when one man had the cars to himself and told everybody to write nothing down. There was a young mechanic in Roper's shop named Cody Whitaker who did the dirty work while Roper took the money. If anybody had held the stamp, it was Cody. He would not talk to me. I caught him leaving at dusk, and the second I said Roper's name, his face shut like a shop door. "I can't." Already walking. "Please, man." 2 minutes. He stopped, checked the street both ways, dropped his voice, and he was young, younger than his hands. "He owns my record. One word from him and I never turn a wrench in this state again. He never threatens me. He never has to. He just makes real sure I can see the drop." He shook his head. "I never did anything wrong, and it wouldn't matter, and you know it wouldn't. I knew. I have stood on that exact ledge, so I did not push. I told him one thing and let him go. In 3 weeks, that whole barn scatters, and after that, nobody, ever, can prove what happened on your bench. Not you, not me. Whatever you decide, you are going to live a long time with the thing you already know." Then I waited, and the days came off the clock, and I ran the flatbed, and I picked Amari up off the corner and listened to him name cars. And every night, I sat on the porch and watched the road, because Roper had found me one evening in my own driveway. He was just there at the curb when I pulled in, window down, dome light off. Pleasant as a Sunday. "Mr. Monroe, I hear you have been down to Bowman, asking after old paper." He shook his head, sorrowful. "You are a stubborn man. It is going to cost you everything a second time." He looked past me, up the street, toward the corner of Delmar and 4th. "That where your boy waits for you? Amari, isn't it? Stands right there on that corner every afternoon, calling out cars before he can see them. Remarkable ear on that child. You want to keep him close to a busy road like that. So much can happen to a boy who is listening to the wrong car." I had never told Barrett Roper my son's name, or which corner, or what he did there. I stood in my own driveway a long time after he pulled off. Cody called me 8 days later, almost midnight. "Somebody sat outside my place tonight," he said. No hello. His voice was doing something bad. 2 hours, motor running, lights off. And I got a text off a number that ain't a number. Just said, "Hope everything's good at the shop, Cody." That's all it said. He laughed, and there was nothing in it. He knows I talked to you. He knows, and he didn't have to say a word anybody could ever write down. "Where are you right now?" "My cousin's." A breath. "Mr. Ridgway used to come by the shop. The old man, near the end. Couldn't hardly walk, but he'd have somebody drive him over just to sit with that Corvette and listen to it run. He knew something was wrong. Couldn't say what. It ate him." A ragged breath. "The spring after he died, Mr. Roper moved the whole Ridgway collection into our back bay for what he called authentication. Kept it to himself the better part of a month. and he stood over me while I put a die grinder to that engine pad and a new stamp over it, and told me to swap the tag and open no tickets, log nothing, till he said so. His voice broke. I did it. It has eaten me for a year. I'll write it down. I'll sign it. Just do not let it be for nothing. It will not be, I said, and I meant it more than I've meant anything. Then I made myself ask, Cody, how many cars? A long pause on the line. That Corvette was the 9th. 9. 9 cars, restamped and dressed down and called junk out of that barn and the ones before it. There's something else, he said, quieter. I'd been in that shop 6 years, and nobody ever asked me to grind a pad. Nobody does that. It scared me. So before I put the grinder to it, I took a picture. On my phone. The pad, the real number, the mark, sharp as day. It's been sitting in my phone for a year with the date on it, and I never told a soul, because I never knew if it made me safer or deader. I sat down slow on my own kitchen floor. Show. You have a photograph, I said, of the real number, taken minutes before you ground it off, standing in his shop, on his orders. Yeah, Cody said. I got that. That was the second link, and it had teeth I never expected. The third link Roper built himself by being too careful. You do not sell a stolen race car under your own name. You dress it down, buy the clone cheap out of the estate, and move the real one through a broker 2 states over who asks no questions if the paper is clean. But a broker sends money, and money leaves a trail in the books of whoever pays it. Odell Ridgway's estate had paid Barrett Roper's fees for 20 years. I did not have Roper's books. Colt did. So I wrote Colt 3 lines. Not about fraud, about his father. I told him Odell started that Corvette every Sunday morning and sat with it and would not let a soul touch it, right up to the end. I told him I had heard what his father heard, and I asked him why a man who supposedly could not tell a champion from a clone would spend his last good Sundays sitting in a cold barn listening to that one car breathe, unless some part of him had known all along what his own expert kept swearing was not so. He called me 4 nights later, late, a drink in his voice, angry but not at me. That's a cheap trick. Playing my daddy on me. We weren't close. You don't get to use him. I'm not using him. I'm asking you a question about him. You do not owe me the answer. You owe it to yourself. A long quiet on the line. Then, lower. He made them wheel him out there the week before he passed. Set a chair by that car. Had somebody start it so he could just sit and hear it. Silence. Why would he do that? If it was junk, why? Because he could hear it, I said. He just did not have the words, and the one man who had the words was lying to him. You have his books. I am not asking you to believe me. Read them, then set up a room and let me stand in it. He hung up without answering, but he read them, and 3 days later his lawyer called to set the meeting, and Colt was not on my side exactly. He was on his father's side, which turned out to be enough. And he was not a fool, so he set it up his own way. He had the Corvette hauled back out of Roper's shop to the barn where it started, and he invited Barrett Roper to stand across from me and let him watch us both. Roper spoke first, and he was good. He did not come at me. He pitied me, out loud, at length, and pity is harder to fight than anger. The gifted man who cried fake once and got destroyed, driving a wrecker now, haunting a grieving family with a fairy tale. Then he laid it down cool as you please. And this man got under your daddy's sealed car in the dark with his own hands and put a light and a solvent on that engine. Ask yourself what a desperate man does to a piece of iron when nobody is watching. Whose word are you taking, Colt? Mine or a tow driver's with a grudge and a history of exactly this? And Colt looked at the ground, and I felt the whole thing tilting away from me. So I turned and I spoke straight at Barrett Roper for the first time since that morning in the yard. 3 years ago, you signed the visitor book at the Bowman Archive, I said. B. Roper. 2 days. The Doss collection. Odell was alive and well. You want to tell this man why a car appraiser drove 3 hours to read a dead engine builder's file 3 years before there was any estate to appraise. The barn got quiet. Roper's face did not move, but his hands did, just once. Research, he said. It is my profession. And when you were done, the photographs were cut out of the sleeve. That is a slander. It is a sign-in sheet. You wrote it yourself. I let that sit a beat. You keep saying my name like it is beneath you, a record driver. A man with a grudge and a record for exactly this. You built that story 11 years ago, and you have lived off it ever since. But there is one thing you were never able to fix with a story, Mr. Roper. And it is parked right between us. And it has been calling you a liar every Sunday morning to the one man in this family who ever sat still long enough to hear it. I looked at Colt. Start the car. Colt looked at me. You do not have to believe one word out of my mouth, I said. Believe the car. Start it and stand here. And listen to it. and then look that man in the eye while it is running and let him tell you again that it is a clone with a tired motor. Colt reached in and turned the key. The engine caught and settled into that lope, that rough, angry stutter that had made a yard full of men laugh a month before. And now nobody laughed because now they were listening. And there's a thing that happens to a room when it finally hears what has been in front of it the whole time. The whole car shook on its springs. The sound filled that barn and rolled out the open doors and down the holler. One of Colt's buddies, the one who had laughed loudest in the yard a month before, took his hat off, and I do not think he knew he did it. The lawyer stopped writing, and Colt stood there with the door open and one hand flat on the roof, listening to the exact sound his father had driven out to a cold barn to hear at the end of his life. And I watched him understand, all at once, that the old man had not been crazy and had not been sentimental. He had been right, and alone with it for years. "That is not a bad tune," I said, over the engine. "You cannot tune that in, and you cannot tune it out. That is a factory race cam, and one engine in the world came with it. An engine cannot fake its own heartbeat, and this one has been telling you the truth every Sunday morning for years, to the one man in your family who bothered to sit and listen." Colt shut it off. In the ringing quiet, I knelt at the front of the car and cleaned the engine pad in front of all of them, slow, and brought a light up under it. And I did not say another word while the metal did the talking. The false number sat there, pale and lying, and under it, coming up in the raking light, the ghost of the real one. And Barrett Roper, half under his breath, the way a man says a thing he has known by heart for years, said the last 3 digits of it, out loud, a beat before anyone else in that barn could have read them. Colt's head came around slow. "Say that again," Colt said. Roper did not say it again. He had gone the color of the concrete floor. And then the number finished surfacing, and it matched, digit for digit, the thing he had said, and it matched the build sheet from the Bowman archive lying open on the fender, and down on the bell housing flange the crossed wrenches of a dead man stood cold in the iron where no grinder had ever reached them. Colt stood up with his father's books in his hand. "There is a payment here," he said, flat and careful, holding himself together with both hands, "to a broker 2 states over, and a bill of sale 6 weeks later from that same broker for a 1969 Corvette. There's no Corvette missing from this barn. Every car my daddy owned is still standing here." He looked up. "So where does a second 69 Corvette come from? In the exact weeks you had his whole collection locked in your shop, telling your own man to grind numbers and write nothing down?" Then he asked Barrett Roper the one question that carried all 3 links in a single breath. "Under the fake number on that engine is the real one and Sonny Doss's mark, and the Bowman archive has his build sheet with both. And your name is in their visitor book from 3 years ago. For a month after my daddy died, you kept his collection alone and logged nothing. And Cody Whitaker will swear you stood over him while he ground that pad, and he has a photograph of the real number on his phone, dated, taken in your shop 4 minutes before you had it taken off. And my father's own books show you paying a broker in those exact weeks who sold a 69 Corvette that could only have come out of this barn." He set the books on the fender. "So I am going to ask you one time, in my daddy's barn, what did you do to his cars while he was in the ground, and I was too busy trying to sell them to look?" Barrett Roper did not have an answer. He opened his mouth and nothing came. 22 years of being the trusted voice in every room he walked into, and it came apart in the time it takes an old number to rise up out of iron. He never once looked at me. I do not think he ever really saw me, from the first morning to the last, and that, in the end, was the thing that beat him. Roper did not come after me. Men like him never come after the man. 3 days later, Amari came home from the corner of Delmar and Fourth Quiet, which he never is, and he had something in his jacket he did not want to show me. It was a die-cast model of a 1969 Corvette, a good one, heavy, the kind they sell in a glass case, and there was a folded note that had been sitting under it on the fence post where he stands to listen for my truck. "For a boy with a good ear," it said, printed, no name. "Tell your daddy some cars you hear coming too late." Amari looked up at me, and he was not lighting up the way he does over a car. He had gone somewhere small. "Daddy," he said, "how did the man know I like cars? I never seen him. Why would he leave it where I stand? He knows where I stand." I did not have an answer for him either. That is the part I carry, not the threat, the question. 8 years old, on our own porch, working out that a stranger had been watching him listen for his father, and me standing there knowing exactly why, and not able to say one word of it out loud. He asked me twice more that week, once at supper and once from the back seat on the way to school. And both times I told him some folks are just strange, buddy. And both times he went quiet in a way an 8-year-old should not have to. And then he stopped waiting on the corner. He started waiting inside the school door where the teacher could see him without my ever asking him to. And that was the thing that put the iron in me for good, watching my boy make himself smaller because a man in pressed cuffs wanted me to feel it. I did not drive to Barrett Roper's shop. I did the slow thing, the thing that lasts. I took the model car and the note, and Cody's photograph and his signed statement, and the build sheet from Bowman and the visitor page with Roper's name on it, and my pictures of the pad, and the line out of Odell Ridgway's own books, and I carried the whole chain to people whose job it is to hold one. It turns out that when you spend years grinding the names off a dead man's cars, dressing champions down as clones and selling them one at a time through a broker you quietly control, you leave a trail a tow driver cannot see but a forensic auditor can follow in her sleep. Once a woman with a subpoena set Roper's accounts beside the broker's books beside Odell's ledgers, it stopped being my word against a good pair of boots. It became arithmetic, and arithmetic does not care whose hands are cleaner. The Corvette alone was worth more than $2.5 million. What Roper had ground out of that collection, car by car, over the years, came to close to $14 million. And a die-cast toy left on a fence post for an 8-year-old put his hands in the middle of all of it. Because a man who will study a child listening for his father and then leave him a warning has written his own confession and folded it into a boy's jacket. Barrett Roper was charged. Fraud, forgery of engine numbers and provenance, theft from an estate, tampering for the ground-down pad and the photographs cut out of Bowman, and witness intimidation, which is the charge judges take to heart because he had gone to a child's corner. The last of that barn was pulled back from the wholesale lot with days to spare, the Corvette with it. He was not humiliated in the street. He was corrected, slow, by the system, which is the only ending I still believe in. Colt Ridgway drove out to my place a few weeks later, alone, with the Corvette on a trailer behind his truck, cleaned up, the real number standing proud on the pad where it belonged. "I owe you an apology," he said, "and I owe my daddy a bigger one. He wasn't a fool sitting out there Sunday mornings. He could hear it. He just couldn't prove it. And the one man he trusted spent 20 years telling him he was imagining things." He looked at me. "Come do the work. All of it. Go through my father's whole barn and find every car that man lied about and set it right. It ought to be done by somebody who can actually hear. It was my old life, my real one, handed back to me on a gravel drive by the son of a man I first met with a chain in my hand and my mouth shut." And then he pulled the Corvette down off the trailer and steadied it and looked at my boy on the porch step. "Keep it," he said. But he said it the other way now. Not to shame a stranger, but to trust one. "Not the whole car. I can't give you the whole car. My accountant would have a stroke. But it needs a proper sort, and it ought to be done in your shop, and your boy ought to be the one who sits in it while you figure out what it needs. My daddy would rather a kid heard this thing run than a museum kept it quiet. Go on, son. Climb in." Amari looked up at me, and I nodded, and my son climbed into a car worth more than everything I own and put both hands on the wheel like he was born there. I reached in and turned the key, and it caught and settled into that lope, and I watched my boy's whole face change as the sound came up through the seat and into him. The same sound a dying old man had driven out to a cold barn to hear. The same sound that had cost me a marriage's worth of pride to finally say out loud. "Daddy," he whispered over the engine. "It sounds broken." "It sounds alive," I told him. That is the difference. It took me a long time to learn it. That night I took Sonny Doss's stethoscope out of the box under the seat, and I did not put it back. I gave it to Amari, and I showed him how to press the probe against a running block and find the one bearing in all that noise that is trying to tell you something, the way Sonny showed me, the way my son already half knew from a street corner. "An engine cannot fake its own heartbeat," Sonny used to say. He meant it about iron. I know now he meant it about people too, about the quiet ones nobody bothers to listen to, and about how the truth of a man, like the truth of a champion, is running under the hood the whole time, if somebody who loves him will just stop talking and hear it. I got my name back, the shop is coming, and the work is real work again. But I will tell you the part nobody puts in these stories. Every afternoon when Amari stands on that corner naming cars before he can see them, I get there a few minutes early now, and I sit in my truck across the street and I listen too. Not for the cars, for the one that slows down when it has no reason to. I expect I always will. Who was Barrett Roper? And how does a man trusted for 22 years grind the truth off a dead man's cars in his own barn? Why was his name in that archive 3 years before anybody died? And how does a photograph on a scared kid's phone and a heartbeat no grinder could reach turn out to be the one thing that brings a man like that down? The whole story is on my channel. Every piece of it, from those first 9 seconds of listening to the last. Go find out how it ends.